In December 1948, the body of a well-dressed man was found on a beach in Adelaide, Australia. No one came forward to identify him. There were no clear signs of violence. Months later, police found a tiny scrap of paper hidden in a secret pocket of his trousers. On it were 2 words, Tamám Shud. It is finished. That scrap led to a book. The book led to a phone number. And the phone number led to one of the most haunting mysteries of the 20th century. My name is Ilyas, and tonight we open another file from the Cold Case Atlas. Case number 003, Adelaide, Australia. The Somerton Man. Pay close attention. Let's begin. On the morning of December 1st, 1948, passers-by found a man lying on Somerton Beach near Adelaide. He was resting against a seawall, well-dressed, polished, and strangely undisturbed. At first glance, it looked almost as if he had fallen asleep and never woken up. But something was wrong. No one in the area recognized him. No identification was found on his body. And although his appearance suggested order and respectability, the case around him immediately began to feel unnatural. In his pockets were a few ordinary objects: cigarettes, matches, a comb, tickets, and small personal items. But none of them answered the only question that mattered. Who was he? The man was clean-shaven. His clothes were neat. His shoes were polished. There was no wallet, no passport, and no clear sign of a struggle. The labels had been removed from many of his clothes, making identification harder. Doctors could not establish a simple cause of death. Early suspicion leaned toward poisoning, but nothing decisive could be proven with the forensic methods available at the time. The coroner later treated the death as not natural, yet the case still refused to settle into one clear conclusion. This was not just an unidentified body, it was an unidentified body that seemed to have been prepared to remain unidentified. Then the mystery widened. Weeks after the body was found, railway staff discovered an unclaimed brown suitcase at Adelaide Station. Police believed it belonged to the dead man. Inside were clothes, slippers, tools, personal effects, and once again, removed labels. Several items had names like Keen or Keen, but police could never tie those names cleanly to the body on the beach. There was also a very unusual type of orange wax thread in the suitcase, the same kind used to repair one of the dead man's pockets. It was a small detail, but a powerful one. It connected the man to the case physically, while still refusing to identify him by name. The suitcase deepened the mystery instead of solving it. Months later, pathologists made one of the most famous discoveries in cold case history. Hidden in a tiny secret fob pocket in the man's trousers was a tightly rolled scrap of paper. On it were the words Tamám Shud, a Persian phrase meaning, "It is finished." The words had been torn from the final page of a copy of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. That alone would have been enough to keep the case alive. But then police found the book. A man came forward after hearing the police appeal and said he had found a copy of the Rubaiyat in his car around the same time and place. It appeared to be the matching book. In the back were 2 things that transformed the case from strange to legendary: a local phone number and a line of letters that many people believed was a code. So let us begin with the explanation that, at first glance, seems the most direct. What if the Somerton Man chose his own death? In that version, the poem matters. "It is finished" becomes a final message. The lack of identification becomes deliberate. The removed labels become part of a personal decision to disappear. A man arrives in Adelaide, carries a final line of poetry in his pocket, and dies alone by the sea. On paper, this theory explains the mood of the case almost perfectly. A private ending, a hidden identity, a final gesture wrapped in literature. but only for a moment. At first, this feels almost complete. A man with no name, a final message in his pocket. But this case was never going to stay that simple. Because if this was simply suicide, why does so much of the case feel engineered? Why remove labels from clothing? Why carry no usable identification? Why the suitcase with altered belongings? Why the hidden pocket? Why the matching book appearing later with a phone number and possible code inside it? And then there is the body itself. Investigators long suspected poison, but no ordinary poison was definitively identified. That uncertainty left space for doubt from the beginning. The suicide theory explains tone. It does not fully explain the structure of the mystery. And in cold cases like this, structure matters. That brings us to the theory that made the Somerton Man famous around the world: espionage. The timing matters. This was 1948. The Cold War was taking shape. Australia, military research, intelligence anxiety, coded writing, false identity, and an unidentified man found dead. With no clear history, all of it created the perfect atmosphere for suspicion. In this version, the letters in the back of the book were not random. They were code. The missing labels were not personal eccentricity. They were operational discipline. The lack of identification was not tragedy. It was tradecraft. Suddenly, the Somerton Man stops looking like a lonely death on a beach. He becomes a possible courier, a messenger, a watcher, someone connected to networks he could not afford to name. This theory is powerful because it makes every strange detail feel intentional. But once again, the case resists complete surrender because espionage explains the atmosphere of the mystery better than it explains the death itself. It tells us why the labels may have been removed, why the code may have existed, why the identity may have been hidden, but it does not tell us with proof how he died. It does not explain why no intelligence service, no family, no associate, no certain witness ever stepped forward and definitively claimed him. And after decades of fascination, the code has never been convincingly solved in a way the wider field accepts. The spy theory gives the case elegance. It does not give it closure. A code can explain secrecy. It cannot explain silence. And in this case, silence lasted for decades. So let us try a third possibility. What if the Somerton Man was not part of a grand intelligence operation, but part of a personal story that was hidden just as carefully? One of the strongest reasons people kept returning to this case was the phone number found in the book. It led police to a nurse living not far from where the body had been found. Her connection to the case has remained one of its most discussed elements. But like so much else in this story, it raised questions without resolving them. That possibility opens a different kind of mystery. Not spies, not international code, but intimacy. A hidden relationship, a private conflict. A man whose death made sense only to a very small circle of people who never spoke clearly. This theory matters because it brings the case back down from global intrigue into human silence. And sometimes, silence is more durable than conspiracy. For decades, the biggest mystery in the Somerton case was identity. Then modern DNA research changed the story. In 2022, University of Adelaide researcher Derek Abbott and genealogist Colleen Fitzpatrick announced that the man was most likely Carl Charles Webb, an electrical engineer and instrument maker born in Melbourne in 1905. The identification was based on hair recovered from the plaster death mask and genealogical matching. It was a major breakthrough, but it was not the same thing as a full official closure. South Australian authorities had not formally confirmed the identification in the reporting I reviewed. And even if the name is correct, another mystery remains untouched. How did Carl Webb die? And why did he die as a man with no clear identity on a beach far from home? So where does that leave us? Maybe the most honest answer is that the Somerton Man case is built around two separate mysteries. The first is identity. Who was he? The second is death. What happened to him? Modern DNA may have brought us much closer to answering the first question, but the second still stands in the dark. The most plausible explanation may not be a dramatic one. It may be a layered one. A man living a life that was more concealed than anyone around him understood. A death that may have involved poison or deliberate concealment. A chain of choices, personal, secretive, possibly desperate, that ended on a quiet beach before sunrise. Not one impossible answer, several incomplete ones. And that is often what makes a case endure. Maybe that is why the Somerton Man still haunts people. Because unlike many mysteries, this one gives you clues in abundance. A beach, a suitcase, a hidden pocket, a poem, a code, a phone number, a possible name, and yet none of them fully unlock the man at the center of the story. Some mysteries survive because there is no evidence. This one survives because the evidence keeps pointing somewhere and never quite arrives. Somewhere in this story, the truth was buried. What theories do you know? Write them in the comments. I read everyone. One file closed, another one waiting. I'm Ilias, and I'll see you in the next case.